Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of November and the new moon that we have in Scorpio on the 13th. So just a couple of pieces of housekeeping before we get there. If you're joining me for 15 minutes at 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening, that's UK time, just please be aware that as of the 29th of October, 0 hours, our hour changed. In the UK, we fall back an hour. So what was originally 7 p.m. now becomes 6 p.m. So in order to calculate your correct time, if you're not in the UK, I've put a time zone converter below, which is a very easy one to use, and to make sure we're all joining at the same time. Of course, if you simply set an intention, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia, you can simply set the intention that you're joining us energetically anyway. Remember, no Zoom links, no notifications, no reminders. You just put it in your diary, put it on your calendar to join for 15 minutes at 7 p.m. And just imagine we're holding hands across the world and sending love to bring in a better world. And these things really do make a difference. Groups all over the world are doing this kind of thing. Secondly, I've mentioned several times, I'm not on Instagram. So the thousands of people following Pam Gregory on Instagram, I've no idea who that is, but it's not me. It's a scammer. So please be aware and don't lose money. So as we enter November, we are still very, very much in the energy of the eclipses. In fact, the energy of the eclipses, the consequences, if you like, of the eclipses are going to continue for about another 6 months, but they're particularly intense around eclipse time. And the lunar eclipse in Taurus on the 28th of October was a very big time of release, of letting go of the old, whatever the old represented for you, that you know you have to move away from, that no longer works, that's heavy, that's empty. It could be a relationship, it could be a job, it could be a residence, whatever, it could be a behavior pattern. We're still very much in that energy. And I said at the beginning of October that October was likely to be a very intense month, and it certainly delivered. I think, if anything, November could be even more intense than October. So let's see where we go with that. But just be aware that in this very, very rapid evolutionary process of breaking down to break through, it has tremendous purpose. It isn't just that we're in the demolition and the destruction for no reason at all. It has tremendous purpose to move us very rapidly to a higher state of being. So just keep that bigger picture in mind as we go through. We're very much in Scorpio season at this time, and one of the benefits of Scorpio is it gives you tremendous focus, willpower, focus, locking in to get the job done. So wherever Scorpio is falling in your chart, it's going to be highlighted in this, well, through a lot of November actually, but very much in this first half particularly. So it gives you that real laser beam focus to achieve whatever you need to achieve at this time, depending on where Scorpio falls in your chart. And as always, if you don't know where these signs fall in your chart, these new moons, these full moons, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below, and that takes you from zero to help you understand what these updates are about, and really helps you get so much more out of them. And that's the beginning of your astrological journey, which is never ending, I find, over lifetimes, in fact. So Scorpio is also the season of secrets. So we are likely to see many more secrets coming to light over this period. And I think once the dominoes start to come down, they will all start to come down very rapidly. But we are in this time of endings, new beginnings. And this time of endings and new beginnings, I think, is really going to continue for the next couple of years or so. But, don't forget that it isn't just all endings. We are already creating the new beginnings. The new is already starting, and the more you put your focus on that, the better life is gonna work for you. But the energy is really building even more strongly through November. And one of the reasons for that is that Mars, planet of god of war in myth, is very strong all of this month. It's very strong. It's strong because it's in, for most of the month until the 24th of the month, it's in the sign of Scorpio. This is the sign of its ancient rulership. It's very strong in Scorpio. So being in Scorpio, it gives it more power and more focus. Second reason is it's moving very quickly through November. It's got a kind of real velocity to it. And it's actually pretty much keeping pace with the sun, which is remarkable, particularly from the 11th onwards through till almost the end of the month. Mars is keeping pace with the sun. So we've got a Sun-Mars conjunction, and the sun itself gives force and energy to Mars. So it's a second reason it's so strong. In fact, a third reason, really, it's the Scorpio, it's the pace, and it's the conjunction with the sun. Also, we have a series of very strong aspects to Mars. Now, I'm going to be talking about some of those in the next video, the second half of the month. But even in this half of the month, I'm going to be talking about those. One of the very, very strong ones is from the 11th to the 14th of November. We are going to have a Mars-Uranus opposition, 21 degrees of Scorpio Taurus. I'm going to be talking about that in this video. Super strong signature. But just to back up, to start right at the beginning of November, we're in the eclipse energy. We're in the eclipse energy of endings. And eclipse energy is usually brings permanent changes, actually, not temporary, but permanent. So be aware of that, because where that does happen, there can be sadness, but there can also be a sense of, yep, that needed to go out of my life to create space for something new. Now, one of the first important aspects we have is Saturn moving stationary direct on the 4th, stationary direct. And whenever a planet moves stationary direct, it's like a big liner, a big ship that's kind of slowing down, stopping, and then changing direction. So it adds great amplification, magnification to the symbolism of that planet. So Saturn, as we know, is all about constriction or constraint or rules, regulations, have to obey the authority figures, that kind of thing. And so at this time, because Pisces is so emotionally sensitive, it's one of the most sensitive water signs, this can feel quite introspective or emotionally heavy, but it's actually a very good time to turn inwards, to start to understand what Saturn is telling us about any greater attempts at constraint from external authorities. Saturn very much represents external authorities. It's the original father figure. So we may be introspective about that, or it may be more, more personal constraints that are coming in your life. But what Saturn does is make us strong. It gives us great discipline, and it makes us very strong to be very aware of how we're using our energy moving forwards. I think with barely any earth in my chart, Saturn has given me immense strength in my life because I've used it very thoroughly. So that's one of the upsides of Saturn. Saturn is the teacher. So as I say, there may be more attempts at constraint or rules, regulations at this round, about this time, this first week or so of November, but I have a sense that we will be less compliant, less obedient, partly because the South Node is in Libra, and that's what we're moving away from. That's people pleasing and compliance, but also because Mars, which represents individual sense of rights and freedoms and sovereignty, Mars in Aries is ruling Aries is I am, that very clear sense of individuality, and I have a very strong sense of center and self. That's Mars in its rulership of Aries. So it's now in its ancient rulership sign of Scorpio, and it still has tremendous strength of knowing who I am, sovereignty, individual rights. We were in this long-term, lasting several months, conjunction of Eris to the North Node. The North Node is our collective soul's path of growth at this particular period, and it takes on the energy of whatever it is conjunct at the time. Eris, as we know, is the sister of Mars, warrior energy as well, and very much the symbolism is around fighting for truth, fighting for freedom, fighting for justice, fighting for a fairer society. So both Mars and sister Eris energy are very strong at this time. So we are probably standing more strongly in our truth and sovereignty than we have ever done, possibly in our lifetimes. And that can be a very good thing, because that the North Node is indicating where we need to go for our soul's growth collectively. On the 4th as well, we have an opposition between Mercury and Uranus. And Mercury is in Scorpio and Uranus is in Taurus. So this can always, Mercury-Uranus aspects can be real downloads and insights. They can bring truths to light, shocks, surprises. This can be really brilliant ideas. Equally, our mind can be speeded up. It's when people have this aspect natally, I always feel that they're kind of plugged into the mind of God. They have access to the higher mind in a much bigger way. But this can also indicate cyber attacks. Mercury is communication. Uranus is linked to the internet, and it's a very discontinuous energy. It comes in kind of quanta. So it can be on-off energy. So there can be cyber attacks, power cuts with Mercury, which is linked to travel and transport. There can be disruptions there. Uranus was the sky god in myth, so it's strongly linked to aviation. So there could be some aviation disruptions. Could be any or all of those things, but we could be feeling pretty sparky, pretty feisty, where our freedoms are in any way threatened at this time. We also have an aspect that runs until about the middle of the month, which is Jupiter semi-square to Neptune. And this is an aspect of idealism. We're yearning for more perfect reality, and many of us are doing that. But it can also at the same time bring up a sense of disillusionment. What I believed in is kind of falling apart right now. Real sense of the veil is dropping. I'm feeling disillusioned. We have quite a nice day briefly on the 6th with Venus that is at 28 of Virgo, trine to Pluto at 28 of Capricorn. And this can bring in, it can be quite intense around relationship issues, that you feel very intense in a positive way around a love relationship. But it can also bring up some jealousy and possessiveness, that kind of thing. It can bring up intensity around financial issues as well. So just see how, and of course, together with Mars in Scorpio, that ups the ante with all of those things as well. That same day, we have Mercury trine to Neptune. And that's a wonderful day for creativity, any creative project or art project, anything which is linked to the imagination, big sky thinking. Lovely, lovely day for that. And then as we move to the 11th, this brings in again some very intense energy, because that's the day when Mars begins to oppose Uranus at 21 of Scorpio Taurus. Now, yes, this is very strong. It's also aspecting, it's conjunct actually, the Uranus of Iran as well. And so and Iran's chart was also aspected by the lunar eclipse, as was Turkey's. So it's pulling in a couple of other countries here. Yes, Israel's and Palestine's very, very much triggered by the lunar eclipse too, solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. So, but I don't want to really add fuel to the fire here. And so I just noticed that in passing in terms of looking at countries. But nevertheless, there's quite a peak of intensity around the 11th to the 14th, I would say. But 11th is the day when Mars starts to oppose Uranus. Now, this is a classic, particularly because they're in fixed signs and particularly because Mars is so strong in Scorpio. This is a kind of classic signature for earthquakes of all kinds. So it can be a literal earthquake, it can be political, it can be financial. It's eruptive, hot, explosive, reactive energy. You know, Scorpio can sting in the scorpion's tail, can be around revenge. So it's a kind of ignition point potentially for anything also to do with our freedoms being constrained, because both Uranus is very much linked to freedom, so is Mars, and they are linked together here. So this is a kickback against rules, control. It's primal, it's urgent, it's fast moving. Both planets, Mars and Uranus, are speedy. They want to speed things up. So we could be seeing a kind of pinball reactivity around the middle of this month. And also on the 12th, we've got the moon in Scorpio again, opposing Jupiter in Taurus. So Jupiter will expand any feeling or emotion of intensity that the moon is feeling. And the moon is often in mundane astrology linked to the people. So this can blow up our emotion. Now, this can be around financial issues, Scorpio, Taurus. It can be around safety and security issues, food, Taurus, all of those things. And so with this kind of heightened reactivity and the Mars-Uranus aspect, to just spend more time taking a breath, stepping back, taking a breath, being mindful, not reacting too quickly. Because we need to get to the stage, so many terrible things are happening in the world, and that's completely undeniable. And our big human hearts go out to them. And we instinctively want to take sides. How could XYZ do this to ABC? And the events draw us in that way. But if we do that, we're just feeding again what we absolutely don't want: war, fear, death, poverty, misery. And we need to get to the state where it is the level of consciousness where it is absolutely unimaginable to hurt a human being, whatever their nationality, their religion, their skin color, it doesn't matter. It is unimaginable. I feel very passionate about this, to hurt another human being, or an animal, or a tree, or a bird. I grieve when trees are chopped down. I fought very vigorously to stop some local woodland being chopped down, because I grieve when trees are chopped down. They are also living beings. So we need to get beyond this reactive pinball hamster wheel, so that enough of us across the world have that feeling of that this is unimaginable. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to enter into this situation. And if enough of us say no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If enough of us bang the drum of peace. So take a breath, step back, feet on the earth as often as you can, be in nature, listen to the birds, hug a tree, hug a child, hug a friend. Do all those simple things to bring you back to center. Okay, so let us now look at the chart for the full moon. So hope you can see that clearly. As always, I've set this up for the UK. This is where I live. So please ignore the clock face and the houses. We're just going to look at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So Sun and Moon always together at new moon. So this is happening on the 13th of November. It's happening at 1:27 a.m. Pacific time and 9:27 a.m. UK time. Sun and Moon are always together at a new moon at 20 degrees 43 minutes of Scorpio. And we'll see that they are in a conjunction here with not only Mars at 22 of Scorpio, but also Ceres. Ceres, who's goddess of harvests and grains, at 24 degrees of Scorpio. So Mars is actually at the midpoint of this new moon and Ceres. And this really can bring up issues. Well, it brings up the intensity of our feeling for a start, intensity of emotion that we're going to feel at this time. And by the way, always see where a new moon falls in your chart. 2043 of Scorpio. See where it falls in your chart. Don't forget to set a new intention for what you want to manifest in your life. You're planting a new seed at this time for what you want to grow in your life. But this could raise issues around food supplies, grains, because it's conjunct Ceres. And also at the lunar eclipse, we had the moon conjunct Jupiter in Taurus. Taurus is linked to food. Jupiter can bring inflation around food. So we could have, because of any disruptions in food supply in some parts of the world, we could therefore have inflation around food. So that's one possibility with this. The moon actually comes to exactly conjunct Mars the next day. Oh, sorry, a little later in the day, a few hours later on the 13th. So here we are going to have intense energy around something, deep turbulent feelings. See where it falls in your chart to have a clue around what we're going to be feeling intense about. This could be in a general sense around relationships, because Scorpio is always related to intense emotion. It could be around finances, because still Scorpio is a financial sign. We're going to come to this opposition to Uranus in a moment. In Taurus, again, a financial sign. Again, food supplies, issues around that. Freedom is a big one, because they're opposing that big kind of quadruple conjunction. They're all opposing Uranus. Uranus around food, finance, freedom, all of the F's there. This could also be bringing up some new beginnings in digitization of some kind. We know that I think it was on the 19th of October, in fact, I believe that in the EU it was announced that the rollout of CBDCs was going to happen, I believe. So this could be another stepping stone towards digitization of currencies. I mean, that's a very clear expression of that energy. Remember that going forwards, because of the increased Aquarian energy, that is leading to decentralization, but you have to make your own efforts towards decentralization. It won't be handed to you on a plate, but that is the direction ultimately of travel, of soul growth, let us say. So all of those issues could come up at this time. And again, this is a very sudden, eruptive, sparky energy that we've got at this new moon. We also have a beautiful aspect, actually, which is that Neptune at 25 of Pisces is trine to the new moon and to Mars and to Ceres. And this is really helpful, because it's putting whatever is happening at this time that we're feeling with so much intensity into a bigger spiritual context, a bigger spiritual context of what is the purpose and the process of everything we're going through right now. It is rapid evolution. it is a shift to a higher state of being. So that's really important to keep in mind. We also have some important quindichiles, 2 of them here. A quindicile is very rarely used by astrologers. It was, I think, rediscovered by my wonderful tutor, who's passed now, Noel Till. It's a 165-degree aspect. You can only use a very tight orb of about 2 degrees either side. It's an aspect of obsession or upheaval or upset, again, adding to this intensity that we're going to be feeling at the time. So we have a quindicile between Mars, I don't know if you can see this black line in this little Q, this small Q here, to Jupiter. This will potentially expand the aggressive urge of Mars. So again, be mindful, take a breath, because this could be on the world stage or it could be personal. It's very much about fighting for your belief systems as well. So really, what I want to say with all this intense energy, and I've got another couple to cover, is we don't have to obey the astrology. The astrology is not fated. I've said this so often in my work. It's not fated. You know, the planets are not doing things to us in terms of determinism, that we have no choice. It's almost like a cosmic weather forecast. And let's say the cosmic weather forecast is saying there's going to be one heck of a rainstorm coming. Now, if you didn't know that information, you could just go out in shorts and a t-shirt and get absolutely soaked to the skin. But the information, the weather forecast, is helpful because you can think, okay, I now have a choice. I can choose to go out and do my walk later when the rainstorm is cleared, or I can go out in my rubber my rubber coat and take my brolly with me and be sheltered from the rainstorm. I have a choice. I have information to allow me to make an informed choice. And that's really how I'd encourage you to see the astrology. We're not fated to plunge into this intensity, and yes, there's sparky conflict here. We can take a breath and we can take a choice. And we can step back and say, I choose to use this energy differently, to give me focus to complete a project, to be creative, etc. It takes us to an eagle's perch, let me say, because I keep hammering my eagle's perch, to say, I now have a bigger perspective on this energy. I'm not just plunged into it as I may feel I am if I watch the nightly news. Really important that we start to have that perspective on astrology, I think. Also, there's another quindicile here, and this time it is between Mercury. You can see this black line, again, this little Q to Uranus. Again, this is very similar to what I was describing on the 4th of the month with Mercury opposing Uranus. Mercury's now traveled out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. So this could be, because Sagittarius is linked to truth and so is Uranus. So this could be, big truths coming to light. Can again be cyber attacks because of all I've said earlier. It could be disruptions in aviation, travel. Sagittarius is also connected to flight. Uranus is connected to aviation. So we could see again, because it's a challenging aspect, quindicile, something happening in those areas. And we also have Saturn square to Mercury. We have Saturn, 0 of Pisces, square to Mercury at 4 of Sagittarius. So with all of this information bubbling out, potentially, truths coming to light, secrets coming to light, Saturn could be putting or attempting to put a big lid on this communication, on this information, Mercury, quelling, suppressing, censoring truths or strong opinions, or even legal developments, Sagittarius, connected to the law. So we will see how this plays out, but there is certainly, through this first half of the month, attempts to put a lid on on information and communication. And it could be that communication is being cut out because of any potential power cuts. I mean, we're having so many big solar flares at the moment, and they quite regularly take out power grids in various parts of the world. And it isn't such a big deal, but if we have a really, really big solar flare, X-class, whatever, it has the potential to take out more geographies in terms of power grids. And remember, with Uranus in Taurus until really 2026, it doesn't fully move out of Taurus till then, that really represents unstable geomagnetics. And of course, we've seen that really since it moved into Taurus in 2018, we've seen much more unstable geomagnetics. That's one of the key themes of Uranus in Taurus. Again, the unstable geomagnetics are linked to the much higher levels of solar flares, and they are one of the key ingredients for our evolution. So, as I've spoken. So, we also have Mars 22 of Scorpio. It's actually in a quincunx 150-degree aspect to both the North Node at 23 of Aries and Eris at 24 of Aries. So again, these same themes come up around sovereignty, individual rights, freedoms, etc. Just to tip into the middle of the month, because this mid-month period, particularly from the 11th onwards, is going to be so high voltage, let's say, so charged. On the 16th of the month, we have Mars coming exactly to that quincunx with Eris. The Sun is also exactly quincunx to Eris, and Mercury is in a sesqui quadrate to Eris. So Eris being very, very aspected around the 16th of the month. And really remember from, really end of November onwards, when this big T-square that we've had virtually all year between Pluto and the nodal axis, South Node isn't generally shown, but it's up here, this T-square, that is starting to move on. So this has been the big year for choice. And I think virtually everyone has made their choice so far. Am I at the victim end of the nodal axis? Am I at the co-creator end? Am I living in fear? Am I living in love? Because as we move forwards into 2024, that T-square is going to just slowly pull back, dissolve, and we've made our choices for the timelines that we are on. So I'm going to stop sharing here, but I'd just like to share with you the Sabian symbol for this new moon. Remember, with the Sabian symbols, they were channeled in 1925, in fact, by a gifted medium called Elsie Wheeler, with the help of astrologer Mark Edmund Jones. And they are for each degree of the zodiac. And what you have to do is round up the degree you're looking at. So in this case, we're looking at 20 degrees, 43 minutes of Scorpio. So you round it up to 21 degrees of Scorpio. And the Sabian symbol is these are so relevant always. They're quite poetic, but I find them incredibly relevant. So the Sabian symbol for 21 of Scorpio, which is relevant to this new moon, is obeying his conscience, a soldier resists orders. Obeying his conscience, a soldier resists orders, because he won't compromise his values. He's sticking to his integrity and his moral compass. Isn't that interesting? I find that incredibly interesting for this new moon in Scorpio, with all that I've been saying. And I'd really like to close with a fabulous quote, which I love dearly. This is from the author Paul Levy, Levy. He's a practicing Tibetan Buddhist and very steeped in quantum physics too. And he really believes that our physical reality is inseparable from our consciousness, as do I. I mean, I believe that very, very deeply in my bones. And his role in life, he sees, is to awaken the collective, to change the dream, to awaken, to break out of this dream that we've been in. I'm pretty much with him on that. So the quote is, and I may have to read this twice because it's quite a long quote, but I love it. Quantum physics reveals to us that turning the gaze of our attention towards anything is a powerful creative act that alters, energizes, and potentiates, i.e., brings into potential, whatever our gaze falls upon. Focusing our attention is an act of creation in and of itself. How often have I said focus is food in the quantum realm? So I'm absolutely with Paul Levy on this. Our beam of attention intersects and interacts with the multi-dimensional probability waves that hover in a ghost-like state of unrealized potentiality that comprise matter in its unobserved state. Absolutely love that, because essentially what it's saying, which is what I've been trying to bang on about in so many videos, is through our frequency, we create a kind of energetic architecture in the crystalline plasma. And that, with increased focus and attention and energy, starts to become more and more kind of solid, and we pull matter out of the quantum soup. We turn it from just nothing into an experience, an event in our lives. Depending on our frequency, that will produce either beautiful symmetrical geometry in the quantum realm, in the plasma, or very distorted, ugly geometry. Think of Emoto Masaru's water crystals and Veda Austin's beautiful, much more advanced work with them. Think of how our thoughts, our emotions are affecting water, which is in every cell of our body, of course, but also how it's affecting the out there plasma, which we're pulling into our reality to make it manifest. So I love this quote so much. I'm going to read it for you again. Paul Levy refers to this as our superhero power. And remember, as we go through this evolutionary period, and many of us are starting to feel this already, we are starting to develop abilities and skills that we have never known in our lifetime. We're probably remembering them from previous lifetimes, but we haven't experienced them in this lifetime, of telepathy, of healing, of this sense of oneness with nature, etc. This is the process we are all going to be awoken to, I think, particularly over the next three years while Saturn is in Pisces until February 2026. Okay, I'm going to read it again. Quantum physics reveals to us that turning the gaze of our attention towards anything is a powerful creative act that alters, energizes, and potentiates whatever our gaze falls upon. Focus is food. Focusing our attention is an act of creation in and of itself. Our beam of attention intersects and interacts with the multidimensional probability waves that hover in a ghost-like state of unrealized potentiality that comprise matter in its unobserved state. Fabulous. This is what we're doing in every moment. We just don't realize it. This is what we've always done in every moment. And, I really want to just stop for a moment on the probability waves. Astrology is the language of mathematical probability. It's not a language of complete determinism. It's a language of probability, mathematical probability, and it gives us the most probable outcomes for, a person, a country, a point in time, but it is not deterministic. It does not say this will absolutely happen, because it's only half the picture, because it needs us as humanity, as single individuals, as collective, to interact with that pattern, that geometry that the astrology gives us to produce an event, an experience in the world. It's half the picture. It's the sheet of music not yet played. It's the potentiality not yet made manifest. We, with our energetic interaction, make it manifest. So that's why I think we increasingly, this is a completely heretical thing for an astrologer to say, for me, I'm increasingly moving beyond the astrology. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to probably be whipped for saying this. We'll see what kind of a reaction I get. But yes, it gives us incredibly helpful information, incredibly powerful, helpful information to guide us on our way. Kuiper belt objects, dwarf planets, absolutely loving them. They are guiding us to a higher consciousness, a higher state of being. But we are the script writers, we're the producers, we're the co-creators of whatever is manifesting in our lives. And I really would love you to start to feel that power in yourselves, that yes, what I give you regularly as updates are cosmic weather forecasts, and only that. Then it's down to you to step into your power, your sovereignty, your radio dial, to live in joy, peace, gratitude, and really start to change the world. Feel quite emotional. God bless. Hope that helped you. Interested in my books, my teaching videos, newsletter, you can find all that on pamgregory.com website. Bye for now. I'll be back very soon. Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of May and the new moon that we have coming up in Gemini on the 22nd. Now, just leading into that new moon on the 19th and 20th, we've got a couple of sort of quite intense and volatile energies happening. They're transient, but it's important to notice. The moon in Aries on the 19th is square to Pluto. That can bring up very intense feelings. And then the next day, the moon comes to conjunct Uranus in Taurus, which can bring up a lot of emotional volatility and reactivity. So just be aware, 19th and 20th, to pull back from any inflammatory situation and just take a breath before you react or speak. Then we have the new moon in Gemini. This is happening at 2 degrees and 4 minutes of Gemini. It's happening on the 22nd of May at 10:38 a.m. Pacific and 6:38 p.m. UK time. So see where this is falling in your chart, 2 degrees of Gemini, because it's a new beginning. Every month we have a new moon and it provides us with a new beginning. So see where that falls in your chart, which house or which area of life. And if you don't know, you can download a free birth chart from my website, pamgregory.com. Go to this link above. You can buy a 2-part tutorial video series, and you'll be able to use that for every single update I do. And it will show you or teach you how to find all these places in your chart, because ideally you need to set a new intention at each new moon, perfect time in the month to do it, to manifest something in that particular area of life for you, wherever 2 degrees of Gemini falls. Now, there is a lot of mutability at this new moon, and that means we have a lot of planets in mutable signs. We have the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus in Gemini, and we have Mars and Neptune in Pisces. The mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces. And they are chameleon-like. They are versatile, adaptable, changeable. They don't necessarily focus that strongly, but they are very often, particularly Gemini energy, can be very creative, but it is a divergent energy. It's like when you shine light through a prism, it can split the light, and the light goes in many directions. And that really is about the versatility of Gemini. And I mentioned in the last video, and I've been writing about this in my newsletter, how in this time of lockdown, Gemini has not only represented the internet, it's about communication, being online, how we've had to adapt our businesses to that. But for many of us, how we've had to become more versatile in what we offer, more flexible, having several strings to our bow, having a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things. That is Gemini energy, and it is mutable energy. So this is what we're seeing a lot of at the moment. So it's very, very positive for that. Now, at this new moon, we have the Sun and Moon square to Mars. And that can make us feel quite assertive about our communication. Par excellence, Gemini is the sign of communication. It's ruled by Mercury. So that can make us feel quite assertive about the air signs, Aquarius and Gemini in particular, Aquarius very much, but Gemini also, because Gemini is quite non-conformist. It doesn't want to necessarily obey the rules and go with the status quo. It's quite alternative. So it may want to find alternative media platforms at this time because it wants to keep freedom of thought, freedom of word, Gemini. And indeed, as I said, we may feel quite assertive about those things because the Sun and Moon are square to Mars. But also there's a lovely, very tight trine between the Sun and Moon to Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn, the sign of Aquarius, the sign of freedom. Saturn is where we're building something for the long term. Aquarius is very linked to the internet. It's ruled by Uranus. So there's a strong sense here of people coming together, the collective, Aquarius, the community, people of like mind, and building something for the long term that may be even more alternative than we have right now. So that's an important, very positive aspect of this new moon. Now, Mars is in Pisces at this new moon. Now, Mars on the 3D level doesn't necessarily work perfectly when it's in Pisces, because Mars are your goals, what you've set your sights on. You want to get there very quickly and directly. It's very focused. However, in Pisces, it can go a little bit dreamy, or now I'm not quite so sure, or I think I'll take some time off before I start to head towards my goal. Maybe I'm not so sure about my goal anyway. It can have that kind of undertow. If you look, undertow is quite a good word for Neptune because it's Lord of the Sea. Think at how it pulls back, the tide pulls back the sand. But I see this in the charts. I see Mars in Pisces, or Mars in aspect to Neptune, which rules Pisces, very much in the charts of people who have regular spiritual action, who do yoga, who do Tai Chi, Qigong, that kind of physical but spiritual action. It's also linked to spiritual activism and spiritual goals and ideals. So it becomes very, very positive when we start to express it at the good Neptune level, a higher Neptune level, if you like to. It's very interesting at this new moon that we have Mercury, ruler of Gemini, very tightly conjunct Venus retrograde in Gemini, square to Neptune in Pisces. Neptune 20 degrees of Pisces, Mercury and Venus 20 degrees of Gemini. So it's a very tight square. So this is one of the really dominating aspects at this new moon, because of course Mercury is the ruler of this new moon because it rules Gemini. So let us take those one by one. Venus, first of all, I spoke a little bit about this in the last video because Venus is going to be square to Neptune all month, but it's exact from the 20th to the 22nd. So it's exact at this new moon. Now, Venus moving retrograde from the 13th of May until the 25th of June, whatever sign it's in, is generally about going back over, reevaluating, reassessing your values and what you want. Venus is very much what you want in a kind of pleasure sense. It can be in a relationship sense. This can make you reassess your relationships as well. So what do I want with Venus? And it can go through several waves when it's retrograde of reevaluation to be sure of what you want. But here also it's square to Neptune. So again we have this undertow effect of, well, I thought I was that, but now I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure what I want. And so we have this kind of wavering or doubt or confusion, again at that lower expression of Neptune, but at the higher level I see hard Venus-Neptune aspects in the charts of long-term spiritual seekers, because it's about that search really of love of source, that connection to unconditional love of source.
So it can work beautifully at that level. But because it's in Gemini, and this is reinforced by Mercury's theme as well, which I'll come to more in a moment, this is the sign of the mind. This is our rational capacity. Whereas Neptune in Pisces is the emotion. I mean, Pisces is super, super sensitive emotionally, deeply, deeply sensitive. So we have a bit of a clash here between the head and the heart as well. And this can create a little bit of churn about, well, I think one thing, but I kind of feel another. And by the way, I'm not so sure anymore. So it can be a little bit of a churn in that way. Now, Mercury comes into the picture too, and Mercury adds to that rational component. And when we have Mercury-Neptune aspects, yes, we can have this undertow of, I'm trying to get clear on the facts, because Gemini is very much about the facts and information, and it has an urge all of the time to gather information, backs of cereal packets, information coming in and wanting to be clear on the facts. But any hard aspect to Neptune can make us think, well, I'm not so sure, that doesn't seem so clear now as I thought it was. So as I mentioned in the last video, and it's a big theme actually of this nodal axis in Gemini and Sagittarius, is what is true and what is not. Because we will have, with the North Node in Gemini and also this new moon in Gemini, we will have an urge to collect clear information, facts and information. Whereas the Neptune side of it can make us suddenly think, gosh, well, I thought I had piercing clarity there, and yes, I know the truth, but now there's another layer. There's another layer to this, so I have to go deeper. And then we get more clarity, and then there's another layer. So I think we're going to be going through waves of truth and not so sure. But it will ultimately get us to a much better place. And always, always, always check in with your higher self. That is the place where you get pure information that isn't compromised by anyone or biased in any way. Check in with your higher self, and that's where you really get a feeling of resonance of truth. Now, sometimes with this urge for the facts, this urge for the information coming into us, we will try and fit them into our old beliefs, South Node in Sagittarius, our old ways of thinking. And that may work for a little while, but again, because the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is conjunct Pluto all year, and I talked last time about a crisis in beliefs, ultimately the onslaught of information will force us to radically change our beliefs. Very, very likely. I think we're going to go through seismic shifts in our consciousness. And I know this has happened to me over the last 6 weeks, shocking shifts in consciousness with what you thought was true. And all of a sudden it isn't. And you've got to start again to create a new paradigm of what you believe is truth. So it's a very strong thing. It'll become stronger. Actually, this new moon in Gemini is a glimpse of what we'll have when we get into September and for the following 6 months beyond September, because the transiting nodal axis comes to square Neptune. So the truth, non-truth will continue then as a question mark, but also as a search. That again, the higher aspect of Neptune in that square to the nodal axis is that we have to incorporate unconditional love into our future collective direction. Fabulous. And if we look at this very tight square between Mercury and Venus together in Gemini, 20 of Gemini, square to Neptune at 20 of Pisces, the best expression of this is divine communication of unconditional love. Divine communication of unconditional love. And a fabulous expression of this is the organization of mass meditations. Online, Gemini, Sun and Moon are trying to Saturn in Aquarius here. We can build a sense of community for the long term. The setting up, often very quickly, Gemini is fast, of mass meditations online has been immensely powerful in shifting the energy and shifting the timelines of what we were expecting to see on the Earth, and all of a sudden there's been a shift, and we get a slightly different trajectory coming up. Those are going to continue to happen because in a very, very big way. But at this new moon, as I say, we not only have 6 planets in mutable signs, we also have 5 planets in air. We have the 4 I've mentioned in Gemini, and we have Saturn in Aquarius. So this combination of a lot of mutability and a lot of air can be quite heady. You know, it isn't sort of really focused and grounded as Earth is. It's very movable. So really bringing you back to this blizzard of information that could be coming into us, because Gemini wants information. It has an urge for a lot of mental input. That's its moon in Gemini particularly wants that, just has an instinctive urge, give me information. Magpie-like, very quick at picking up information. But it may be a kind of, we may feel like we're whitewater rafting at times with so much coming into us in the external world. And indeed, there's going to be a lot of action on the ground. I mean, if we look at this aspect between Eris in Aries that we have square to Pluto in Capricorn that we have all of 2020 into late 2021, that is exact at this new moon. And we saw that in Hong Kong. I've often quoted that. We're seeing this with many protests now happening across the world. With Eris in Aries is what about me? Am I being heard? Are my needs being noticed? Versus the top-down authority of government, Pluto in Capricorn. So we're going to see more of that. Seeing lots of protests breaking out, protesting against the lockdowns in various states, various countries. I'm not expressing a personal opinion here. I'm just observing it's happening. But remember also that we have a gradual shift of planets out of Capricorn, just this top-down authority. In January we had, and indeed we still have Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn. Saturn's going to back into Capricorn again on the 2nd of July. But that is going to ease because we get into December and you have Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius. And finally, you have Pluto fully moving into Aquarius in 2024. So there's going to be a shift away from this patriarchal top-down rules and regulations authority in the way that our old paradigm, our old structure has been run, and increasingly shifting into Aquarius, which is much more to do with the collective, the community, and the power of the people. At best, this is the power of the people coming together. So really recognize that, this is our opportunity to create a much better world when everything is in flux. Yes, we're in lockdown, but we're between paradigms, essentially. We're creating the new paradigm in every moment because the old one is dissolving and crumbling before our eyes. And all of this mutability and air is creating this kind of flux from which we can birth something new. So if our point of reference is external, lots of information, some of it contradictory, sometimes we're clear, sometimes we're not, a lot of action on the streets happening as well to accelerate the collapse of that old order. For me, I keep it really simple. Talked about this many times. If you turn your focus inwards, you can do this anytime at home for free. Just shut your eyes and turn your focus to your breath. And if you imagine that you're breathing in and out through your heart as if your heart was your lung, it starts to slow and deepen your breath. And if you're really focused on doing that, just that and nothing else, just focused on your breath, apart from the fact it instantly starts to change the biomarkers in your blood, reduce the cortisol, it drops you into stillness and the present moment. Because if you're focused on your breath, you can't be anywhere else. You are in the present moment and you're going deeper and deeper into stillness. I do that every day. I try, if I have time, to do it several times a day, but I definitely do it once a day. It is just an absolute anchor in your center. The other thing I do, and I try to keep these practical hints to you, tips to you, really simple, so anybody and everybody can do them. I've got a very busy schedule, many people have. I have to take an hour in my day to be in nature. I absolutely have to, because that sets the tone for my day. That's my fix. And because the world is quieter at the moment, I'm very lucky to be able to walk in some local woods. And in the Northern Hemisphere, with spring coming, we have these electric lime green in the leaves. It's just vibrant. You can feel it. It's buzzing. I'm hearing more birds. I'm seeing wildlife that I wouldn't normally see in a day, owls that are usually quite nocturnal, and buzzards and deer and foxes, and I'm seeing bumblebees a lot more. It's just come alive. Nature can revive so quickly if we give her a little bit of space and stillness and quietness. So I really try and milk those moments when I'm in that hour in nature. I look at a bird, I look at a leaf, I stare into a wildflower, I look at a blue sky, I look at anything that will make me feel gratitude and appreciation and love for the earth in that moment. Anything really, really simple. And then for the rest of my day, whenever I get a spare moment, I go back to that feeling. I look at the sky. We can all look at the sky wherever we are. Look at a tree. Anything that will remind you of those higher vibration frequencies, higher vibration energies of gratitude, appreciation and love, because the more they become our default frequency, the better, because we need to create from that rather than kind of buzzy unsureness. So that's what I do. And even if you can't get into nature, if you're living in a flat in a city, imagine that you are in your favourite place in nature. We can all do this, whatever our circumstances, and it will all add to that collective raising of consciousness, because we live in a vibrating universe. We absolutely do. And we are already on that road to making a new world. And if we can just even if we don't know exactly what it's going to look like tangibly, if we can trust that if we hold the frequencies of gratitude, appreciation, love for the earth, vibrant colour, fertility, then we will be pulling those qualities towards us from the quantum soup. We are absolutely doing that in every moment. And the more we can do that and get used to doing that in our days, even just for a few minutes here and there, we start to step into our power and have a much greater sense of being creators, empowered creators, rather than being buffeted moment by moment up by what's happening in the world. The old has to crumble before the new can begin. It's a process in nature. It's Pluto and Capricorn. It's the tree falling in the wood has to rot down before it can produce new life and new growth. So that's what we're going through. Remember, Saturn in Aquarius. Aquarius is the most futuristic sign, or one of the most, with Sagittarius actually, that one of the most futuristic signs. So we are putting work, Saturn, into creating that future right now. We're going to be doing it more and more as we move through this year as well. And I'd also, with Gemini, another big theme I'd like to remind you of is exploring choices. Gemini is very much about choices. So choices in where we have a public portal, choices as I've spoken about that, choices of our thoughts, choices of our emotions, choices of where we put our focus in every moment, because where we put our focus, we put our attention and we put our energy. And so we're going to be sifting through a lot of options here. But if you can just hold that anchor, hold that spiritual center, then we will be getting to a better place. So I hope that's been helpful. To very different energy to the first half of the month. And if you'd like more information about my books, my teaching videos, my monthly newsletter, just check out my website, pamgregory.com, and have a wonderful new moon in Gemini. Don't forget to set your new intention. Bye for now.
everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of September and the full moon that we have coming up in Pisces on the 20th. Now, there's no doubt that the energy is being amped up. We can all feel it. Everybody can feel the intensity. And it's being amped up in one sense in a very good way, because we're aware we've got all this photonic energy pouring onto the earth. We are easily seeing the increases in strength and amplitude of the Schumann resonance. That's the Earth's heartbeat, essentially. Again, you can track those to give you the evidence. And also, we're very aware of the sun becoming much more active and shooting off many more coronal mass ejections as well. Again, a good source for that is spaceweather.com. So there's no doubt that cosmologically, physically, if you like, our world is changing, and that is upgrading us constantly. That's upgrading every cell in our body. And I've mentioned again in previous videos that I'm kind of checking that out with my dowsing as well, because other dowsers are saying the same, that this stretch in bandwidth for humanity is just getting wider and wider, and it's rapid. You know, this acceleration of our upgrade is remarkable, how quickly it's happening. People are going in quantum jumps, really, in their frequency, which is really exciting. But equally, and of course related to that, there is greater attempted control being imposed on societies as well. Look at Australia. So we are absolutely, in these next few months, reaching our tipping point. I think there's no doubt about that. It's going to be very intense in these next few months at the 3D level. But of course, you don't have to live at that 3D level. So the big aspects for this year, the dominant squares, as I've talked about before, are Eris square Pluto and Uranus square Saturn. Now, in each of their respective squares, Eris is stronger than Pluto, it's further out, it has a longer orbit. Uranus is stronger than Saturn, it's further out, has a longer orbit. So ultimately, Uranus and Eris, that have very similar symbolism of awakening and revolution and breaking down to break through, are going to win, but not without a challenge. This is what all of this year, and to some extent next, but this year is the most intense, I think, are about. And by the way, talking of intensity, if any of you have any planets or aspects at 24, 25 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, you're going to be feeling intensity in some area of your life, because that's where Eris and Pluto are operating, 24, 25 of Capricorn. So, but just know that that is meant to be happening. That's a process that we're meant to be going through, because what this is really about, both of those squares are really about social and political structures that are no longer serving our human evolution, our highest good. They are systems that we have already outgrown. So again, just know that. Then on the 20th of the month, and this is happening at 4:54 p.m. Pacific and just past midnight, 0:54 a.m. UK time, the next day, we have the full moon at 28 degrees, 14 minutes of Pisces. Now, full moons are always times, it's the peak of the moon cycle. It's a time when often our feelings and emotions come to a head in a big way, because it's related to the moon, but particularly when it's a water sign, and particularly when it's Pisces. Pisces is probably the most sensitive of all of the water signs. So this is deeply sensitive, deeply emotional. And at a full moon, the sun and moon are always opposite each other. So we have the sun at 28 of Virgo, moon at 28 of Pisces. And this is really in astrology known as the health axis, health and healing. And Virgo can be allopathic or alternative health, but it's about health and healing. And, you know, it's very obvious in terms of what's happening in our world. Now, what's also interesting at this full moon is it is virtually at what is known as the anaretic degree. The anaretic degree of any sign is 29 degrees, 29 and that last degree of the sign. In this case, it's not only almost at that anaretic degree, but that 29 degrees of Pisces is the last degree of the zodiac.
And I think that's very interesting too, because you go back over the last few videos I've done, very often I was talking about endings and beginnings, conjunctions that are straddling signs. There's been such a strong sense of endings and beginnings. And equally, we have that here because we're almost right at the end of the zodiac. So very clear sense of ending. And of course, with an ending, births a new beginning. Now, it is beautiful at this full moon in that we have the moon conjunct Neptune that rules Pisces. So this is very fine energy. It's very fine perception, creatively, spiritually. This is about your connection to source, your connection to the divine, your connection to oneness. It's that state of, it's to do with altered states where you just get this sense of losing time and space, where you just kind of blend with your surroundings. People have this when they're, creating, they're painting, they're writing poetry, or even sitting in nature, meditating. It can be any of those things that produces this very high level connection. So this is beautiful at its highest level of expression. However, every planet can express at lowest and highest. And one of the lowest levels of expression here, which I think we are seeing in the world in general with that Neptune in Pisces, is confusion and emotional overwhelm. It's all just too much. We've reached the end of our tether in being able to deal with things emotionally. And particularly, as I say, you're looking at this health axis, this Virgo Pisces axis. So it can produce those feelings of it's just too much. But remember, with every aspect, we have the opportunity to play it to the highest or the lowest. What is also interesting about this opposition Sun-Moon that involves Neptune is Virgo is a sign ruled by Mercury, wants to be exact and precise and right and kind of dot the I's and cross the T's and nail everything down, all the facts down. But then in the opposition to Neptune, it can run into this kind of fog of misinformation, disinformation, what's true, what's not, who to believe. So I think this aspect is really encouraging us in our mastery of not going to external sources of any kind for our information, but coming back to our intuition, or reading alternative external sources and then coming back to our intuition. So whether you do that through your dreams, through your meditation, through your dowsing, through your muscle testing, whatever your process is to check in with your higher self, make sure it is your higher self that is giving you the information or the confirmation rather than external sources, because this is all about developing our intuition, which is going to be becoming so much stronger for all of us as we upgrade. So that's a very big aspect of this full moon. Now, another important aspect, this is full of tension, I have to say, also at this full moon. We have about 4 T-squares in this. So one of the T-squares is the Sun and Moon opposite each other, 28 of Virgo Pisces, are tightly squaring the galactic center at 27 of Sagittarius. Now, of course, the galactic center is always there, but when planets align with the galactic center, then we have a kind of almost a fast track, if you like. It's very direct to access the energy with which we are creating our worlds. It also suggests this will be a very important full moon at this time. Galactic center, this is going to be very big. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and it's at 23 degrees of Aquarius in a beautiful trine, exact trine to Mercury at 23 of Libra. So that is just lovely. It has a sense of expansion. It has a sense of being able to perceive and plan and think about bigger horizons, bigger future possibilities, just bigger visions really for humanity, Aquarius, particularly those connected to freedom and human rights. That's very connected to Aquarius as well. So that's beautiful. Also, there's another lovely trine here between Pluto in Capricorn and the Sun in Virgo. That's about stepping into our power, finding a sense of stepping into our power. Mercury is in one of the T-squares as well. We've had the T-square with Sun, Moon, Galactic Center. Mercury is in a T-square at this full moon with, because it's in Libra, it's opposing Eris in Aries and squaring Pluto in Capricorn. So it's bringing up again, these faster moving planets keep kind of highlighting that Eris-Pluto square, which is all about people taking to the streets, demanding to be heard. Eris is very much about equality. Libra is also about equality, but running up against these top-down rules, regulations, structures of government and big institutions. So that's another T-square here. Another, yet again, another T-square involved at this full moon is between Venus at 11 of Scorpio, square to Saturn at 7 of Aquarius, and Venus is opposing Uranus at 14 of Taurus. Now, this is quite interesting, particularly if Venus, sort of 11 of Scorpio, is moving through your 5th house or your 11th house of relationships in your birth chart. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below. You can buy a 2-part tutorial video series from my store. You can use that forever to determine the meaning for you of any update I ever do. So Venus comes into a square with Saturn on the 17th of the month, 17th of September. If you're in an unsatisfactory relationship, this can be a time where you feel that the relationship is maybe a little safe and secure, but also controlling, a little bit routine, a little bit deadening maybe. And then by the full moon and beyond that, Venus is then opposing Uranus, and Uranus is the urge for freedom and independence. So that may be the time, if you're in an unsatisfactory relationship, that you just want to say, I'm done. I want freedom. I want independence. I'm off. I'm doing my own thing. So it can create sudden breaks in a relationship. It can also create sudden beginnings out of the blue, unexpected, if you are looking for a relationship. So it can very much operate on that relationship area, but also Venus always has the generalized meaning of currencies. We could see currency fluctuations at this time, much bigger, I think, in October. October is going to be a huge month, I feel. We have another T-square. It's all to do with kind of tension, but also action. Wherever you have squares, oppositions, T-squares, they produce action in the world. Now, this other T-square is between the Sun and Moon again, Virgo Pisces, squaring a dwarf planet I haven't mentioned before called Ixion, I-X-I-O-N. And that is at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. Now, that is the anaretic degree of Sagittarius. So when I go on to describe the symbolism of Ixion, you'll see that there's a kind of unraveling quality to it, if you like, a challenging, a breakdown quality to it. So this is also, by the way, emphasized by the South Node being in Sagittarius. It's our collective past, what we're moving away from. So Sagittarius represents things like the education system, the legal system, ethics in society, religion. So just think to yourself, with Ixion at 29 degrees of Sagittarius, is education working well in the world? Is the legal system working well? Are ethics working perfectly in society? Just ask yourself those questions. Now, the information I'm sharing here about Ixion, I very much have to credit the brilliant astrologer researcher Alan Clay, who runs the Dwarf Planet University. He has done this research, so I'm simply quoting it. But Ixion orbits in, well, first of all, they give you a good idea. He is known as the lawless brother of Pluto, the lawless brother of Pluto. Ixion orbits in the Kuiper belt, largely beyond the orbit of Pluto, but sometimes coming in between Neptune and Pluto. Slightly longer orbit than Pluto, 251 years. And in the myth, and I'm going to really abbreviate this myth because it's not pretty, Ixion murdered his father-in-law and he was kind of outcast. But Zeus, king of the gods, took pity on him and gave him a second chance. But Ixion rather blotted his copybook by trying to rape Zeus's wife. So at that point, he was kind of excommunicated and spun off into eternity. Now, When I talk about myths, sometimes people say, oh, it's so kind of vague and abstract, and what does it mean for me? Well, when I started to talk about the Eris myth a couple of years ago, people say, oh, it's vague and abstract, and what does it mean for me? Well, I think we can see, if you think of Eris as the street fighter, just how powerfully Eris has worked in the world in the last 20 months with the protests, the demonstrations all over the world. It's been very clear, very tangible, and very dramatic, I think, because Eris is about the shift of the age. It's a paradigm shift, which is what we're into at the moment. So that's why I'm talking about Ixion. So at the lower level of expression, Ixion is linked to total criminality, actually, and amorality, where Ixion had no respect for any social mores or rules or even human life. And just ask yourself, is Ixion operating in society in any way right now? At the higher level, and again, I'm quoting from the work of Alan Clay, at the higher level of expression, Ixion is beautiful. It's about having your spiritual mission, living life on your own terms, defining your own rules and following your bliss. So is there a sector of society, do you think, that is expressing that higher level of Ixion? I think there is in droves, and the momentum of that is building by the day. And that to me is very much about people breaking away to new earth, defining their own social rules, living on their own terms, finding their bliss. It's another beautiful symbol at the highest expression of Ixion for new earth. So Uranus in its strong aspect to Saturn, Eris in its strong aspect to Pluto, and now Ixion in this powerful T-square, all about the breakdown, creating chaos and trouble. Remember, Eris is the patron saint of chaotic creation as well. It's all the same theme, the breaking down to breakthrough. So know it's going to be a demolition site. Know the demolition is going to get louder, and it is meant to get us through to a different place. This tipping point of the next few months will kind of get us to a very different place. I think even 6 months down the road, we're going to be in a different place. And you don't have to live at the 3D level. And I'm going to come on to that in more detail anyway. So coming back to Alan Clay's research as well, he also said something very interesting, that Ixion transited from Sagittarius into Capricorn in March, April 2020. That was the beginning of the pandemic. Capricorn is linked to big business and stock markets and that kind of thing. There was a big drop in the stock market at that time. Ixion has now reversed, retrograded back into Sagittarius, but it moves back into Capricorn at the end of October. And I think that's going to be very interesting to watch for stock markets and financial volatility in general. Now, Ixion will be crossing 0 of Capricorn. Remember that 0 of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, they are all known as the world axis. So when planets trigger, important far out planets particularly, trigger the world axis, we see events kind of big time on the world stage. It becomes very public. So that's going to be an interesting dwarf planet that I'm going to be trying to follow as time goes on. Then we have the Libra equinox, and this is when the sun moves into Libra. This happens on the 22nd of September. It happens at 12:20 p.m. Pacific and 8:20 p.m. UK time. So when we have equinoxes and solstices, this is like striking a tuning fork for the next 3 months until the next equinox or solstice. It's like a backdrop energy, if you like. And the ancient peoples knew that at these times of equinox and solstice, that they were very powerful, that the veil to the higher energies was much thinner. It's almost like there were times of portals where they could access that higher information more readily. And that's why it's such a great time, the day before, the day of, to meditate, to get into group meditations. It makes the energy even more powerful. So, and that we are going to have another surge of energy around about this Libra equinox, and just feel it coming down the track. In the surges of energy keep on coming because the Earth is passing through the photon belt, which it only does roughly every 12,000 years. But nevertheless, the solstices and equinoxes are very powerful for these big waves of energy. We also, if we're looking down the timeline, I think we're going to have another huge one on the winter solstice as well. So that's why they're so important to kind of maximize the opportunity we're given at this time. So at this Libra equinox, we have another T-square. It is full of intensity. We have a very dominant T-square between the moon at 21 of Aries. Remember, the moon in mundane astrology is the people. The moon at 21 of Aries coming on to Eris at 24 of Aries, opposing Mercury at 24 of Libra, and they are squaring Pluto at about 24 of Capricorn. So the moon with Eris in Aries, boy, that is strong. That's a strong, assertive, public pushback, outcry, very much about fairness and equality. Mercury in Libra, justice. Something else that's important, I just want to backtrack, something I forgot to say about the full moon. The sun is in an out of sign conjunction to Mars at the full moon, 3 degrees of Libra, Mars is at. Sun is at 28 of Virgo. When we have that, Mars wants to act, it wants to fight. Mars rules Aries, it wants to do something. In Libra, it wants to fight for others. It wants to fight for justice. So it could be very interesting to see, because that energy is kind of picked up again here at the Libra equinox, just a couple of days later, where we've got strong Aries energy, strong Mars, strong Aries, it's the same thing, about the people demanding to be heard, every single person demanding to be heard, nobody being peripheral, nobody being marginalized, no subdivisions of society, whether it's race or religion or national, whatever it is. Because Eris is very much against elitism and wants this feeling of inclusivity, everybody needing to be heard. And Mercury in Libra is also saying equality and justice. So a very strong picture setting up the next 3 months, and that the astrology for the next 3 months is, you probably don't want to hear this, but exceptionally strong. But we don't have to live at that 3D level. Because if you're watching the nightly news, which I stopped watching mainstream media almost 2 years ago, and it's made a massive difference in my life, I have to say. But if you're watching that, you will absolutely, yes, you can absolutely say, yes, that is a reality for sure. It's dense, it's contracted, lots of scary stuff. That is a reality, but it doesn't have to be your reality. And that's really important to understand, what a multitude of timelines, what an infinity of timelines we have available to us. And everybody is really on their own individual timeline now. They're big collective kind of bands of frequency, but within that, everybody's on their individual timeline. So if I think, just to say, because it's so easy to say, well, it's spiritual bypassing. If you don't look at that, you've got to know what's happening in society. You've got to know what's happening in the world. And indeed, this is part of our mastery, to have the strength to say, despite knowing that, I can still keep my frequency high. So when kind of negative stuff comes in at me that people send me, and I can feel my frequency dropping, I will simply say, not my reality, or not my timeline, or see a big delete button or a big red cross or something like that, saying, not mine. It's existing, but it's not mine. I'm going to put my attention, my energy, and my focus over here. And that's what I'm going to create from. So I'd really say, make bliss your obsession, make peace your obsession as many times in the day as you can. And I know it's super scary stuff out there, but that's why it's so important to move to a different place emotionally. So try to drop into bliss, use that moon Neptune at the full moon, try and drop into peace as often as you can, and also make high frequency your obsession. Because the more you do that, the more you will be creating from a very high place, not a very low place. You know, we're creating from the inside out. We know this. And last time around, I just at the end of the video, I happened to mention plasma. And since then, I've had a lot of people writing to me saying, tell me more, tell me more. Well, I don't know anymore yet. I'm just very interested in it. And so you've really got to do an internet search. But just this morning, actually, I was involved in I was attending an online conference, and I heard Penny Kelly, Penny Penny Kelly, who's a wonderful, wise, brilliant woman, talking about plasma. And I won't be quoting her exactly, but essentially what she was saying is that plasma is produced from the electromagnetic fields of energy in the universe. And they start to form filaments, if you like, almost filaments of light, and fractals and particles. This is the whole quantum physics shift from wave to particle in a little more detail. And because those filaments are starting to form a grid or an electromagnetic lattice, if you like, particles start to attach to that grid. It's like our skeletal, it's like an architect's plan, if you like. It's our skeletal next step into matter, into reality. And that I got really excited about, because I think the more we know that the more coherent we are in our energy, the more coherent plasma, the patterns in plasma, the fractals, the forms that it's creating, the more coherent they are to produce what's coming down the road, to produce our future, our experiences, our reality, what we're going to meet day to day. When we are low frequency, the energy is very incoherent around us, scattered. So, but because, as I said last time, we have this idea that we are creating from that something intangible as yet, not fully formed, not fully matter, but wafty, still wave, still ether in one sense, electromagnetically charged ether, if you like. But it's this substance, which some people can see, some sensitive people can actually see plasma. These whitish forms that people have around them. Then I think you start to get a much greater sense of empowerment, because, yeah, I can affect that. Yeah, that's way easier than affecting a brick or a table. So it's just a little bit more information. I hope that's given you some help. Penny Kelly has written heaven knows how many books, so there may be a lot more information in her books about plasma. She's a great lady, and I really recommend her to you. So it's a lot in this second half of September, but also, as I say, October is a huge month too. So hope that's helped you. If you'd like more information about my books, my teaching videos, just check out my website, pamgregory.com. And thanks so much for listening, and bye for now.